Welcome to Watching the Throne,
a lyrical analysis of Kanye West.
My name is Chris Lambert.
And my name is Travis Bean, and we are back for part 2 of Jesus Lord, because it's that kind of song where you have to do it. One part isn't enough. 3 parts is too much, although we could do it. Who knows? It remains to be seen if this could be a 3-part episode. But 2 parts, it's necessary for songs like this. You got your Runaways, you got your St. Pablos, you got your No More Parties in LA's, you've got your Jesus Lords. Just how it's the way the peanuts shake out of the bag. It's just what's happening.
Yeah, if we take over an hour on a song like Donda Chant, that's not even a minute, you got to imagine the length that we go on a song that's 9 minutes long and involves this many bars. Yeah. So this is exciting. Though I will say the most exciting part of Jesus Lord to me is still Ye's verse. I know there are people that think like Jay Electronica and 5EO have the best verses on the album. And while this is like a great verse and very like thoughtful, like the wordplay is amazing, the imagery that he uses is amazing, I'm still a Ye homer,
I would say on both the song 5EO and Jay Electronica are on, Kanye has the better verse.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's just how we roll.
There's going to be people that are rolling their eyes like, come on. Come on.
But I think like those people made Kanye step up his game. Like he probably heard Jay Electronica's verse and was like, oh shit, like I got to go ham. Just like he did to Kendrick on No More Parties. Like he probably just was like, all right, here we go. I got to show the people that I'm the GOAT.
Yeah. Same thing with 5EO, right? Like 5EO recorded the verse and Ye was just like, I'm gonna walk into this other room for a little bit and see.
I'm gonna talk just as long as 5EO did. 5EO.
Yeah.
5EO. God, I don't know why I have an instinct to say 5EO.
Maybe have you ever owned a Vizio TV?
I have several of them actually.
Well then there it is. You know?
That must be it.
There we go. So yeah, part 2 of our Jesus Lord, I keep wanting to say Jesus is Lord episode. And part 1, I'm sure you've listened to it. And if you haven't and you're listening to this, interesting choice. But in part 1, we went over some of the key insights, in terms of Ye's verse and how he's setting up a whole lot of payoff on things that have come before on the album and things that will come after in terms of the dark thoughts he's been feeling, how that has been affecting his behavior, street life, and the idea of like how your path can be decided by societal elements for you, and your dreams can kind of just be taken right out of your hands just by where you grew up. Your dreams can turn into nightmares. And the need then for role models in your life, for father figures, parental figures in your life, and the importance of the role that they play, the impact that Donda made on Ye's life by like being there and guiding him. In the song Life of the Party, he talks about like an art teacher that was really influential to him. And then in the other version of Life of the Party, he talks about a principal that was really influential. So you have these people that kind of like guide and direct you the same way that Ye is now in a position to guide and mentor younger artists that are coming up and trying to make a difference in their lives so that they can pursue their dreams rather than falling into their nightmares. And this idea between like the dream scenario and the nightmare scenario mirrors the ideas that we've already explored in terms of angels and demons, God and the devil, that has already been a huge motif on this album. And this song is just really the culmination of a lot of that talk, of the tensions that push and pull you towards a fate that is worse than maybe what you deserve, and a fate that is like empowering and promising. So Ye's verse is getting into a lot of that tension and those dynamics, even ending with that line, then Big Bro just blacked out and all you seen was the lights, which really gets into that glass half full, glass half empty of either the character who is going to shoot another young man out of vengeance for losing his brother, is either blacking out and firing the gun, and in that way putting an end to this other life and his own life, or he is having this moment of divine revelation and realizing that the path he's choosing is wrong. And that's kind of the tension that we see on this album, where you can either fall into the darkness and let the devil win, or God intervenes and, takes control and you're off on a better path. So that's where Ye leaves us off with, is like all these dark tensions in his life, and then telling the story of how these things start to manifest in other people's lives, and having this moment of climax of going down one path or a better path.
Yeah. One of the key lines is Kanye says, you want dreams to come true, but I have nightmares. And the idea of like the dream of a better life and the nightmare of your reality. And you've described a lot of how Kanye's done that, both on the album and on his verse, pitting this aspiration, this optimism to do something better and achieve something greater, become more connected with God and living up to your mom's legacy, versus this reality, which is this long story where, the brother's life is taken and we see the fallout with the family, from the mom to the older brother to the daughter, and just how much violence can rip communities apart, which is a great lead into Jay Electronica's verse, because he speaks about his power and the power of religion and the struggles that be between like larger powers and like the elites and the politics of the world versus people who are really affected by it, and how you can affect change in the midst of all of that, like this gargantuan struggle, this gigantic power struggle that's going on across the world, that's been going on throughout the history of time. Like, how do you, this little person, like fit into that? Like, how do your ideology shape from that? Like, how do you view the world, and how do you ultimately go out and shape the world? Like, it's this very daunting thing. And part of the reason I really wish the Lox was still on the song is they bring in suddenly a very like gritty, real element to the song that I think fuses well with Jay Electronica's part, because Jay Electronica's part is very like, it's in the clouds kind of, it's this like big, like gaping view of the world and like of all the powers that be. And then the Lox kind of zooms in and talks about these like minute problems, like these little situations and like little struggles they're going through. It's really cool how it all balances out. But even if it's just Kanye and Jay Electronica, I feel like Jay Electronica's verse does serve as the fact that he does widen the scope a bit and like looks beyond just like these little situations Kanye's looking at. It makes the song feel so huge, especially heading into Larry Hoover Jr.'s part, which is kind of like the Lox, like bringing this very real situation to the forefront, which is actually maybe why Kanye took the Lox off the song. He was like, Larry Hoover Jr.'s got it.
That's true. It does feel like I think it's not the right word to say like repetitious, but it can be more of a cherry on top rather than the like core ingredients. And I think you zooming out a little bit, this song does have a really interesting dynamic as you're describing, in that Ye gets into something that's like very self-reflective and personal about how things have affected him and the place that he's in, that comes off as much more poetic, right? And much more like story driven. It feels like a little how do I want to, like, narrative-y.
Yeah, right.
In that sense, like performative, not in like a negative way, like, oh, you're performative, you're faking this, but almost like a theater production kind of thing.
It's what Kanye is probably best at, like telling these stories. Like, you could tell he's influenced by movies and stuff. He's really good at creating those kinds of images. Yeah,
it's heightened in that way that narratives are, whether it's poems, books, movies, TV shows. Like, it has that heightenedness to it and that poetry to it. And he goes from something that's very personal to then zooming out to how other people might be affected and detailing this story that is very much like a movie or a short story of this family, as we described, which is grounded but still fictional. Even though it's relatable to many, and people might say, like, this describes someone I know or something I went through, or stories that I've heard. Then you have Jay Electronica, as you're saying, who zooms out, but he's also getting at these power structures and power dynamics. And then you have Larry Hoover Jr., who comes back in and does the nonfiction version of everything, and essentially says what Kanye says, but in the memoir style, in the nonfiction style. It's a documentary compared to the movie. And the one line that I think kind of connects all of them is because the conditions in this capitalist society is what made him, is what Larry Hoover Jr. says in response to his dad and what happened to his dad and his dad's incarceration. Like, his dad didn't want to do the things that he did. It's just, in this capitalistic society, these are the conditions. So you have Ye reflecting on how these things have impacted him personally, while Jay Electronica looks at really the influences on the world at large, like zooming out and seeing how these capitalistic societies harm people on a larger scope and scale, which is incredible that you have him so on point. And all three of these verses revolving around that same core idea, but approaching it in different ways. Ye from that cinematic heightened point of view, Larry Hoover Jr. from the nonfiction documentary point of view, and Jay Electronica from the zoomed out, we're looking at like the scope and scale of nations kind of view. Yeah. I've never seen something like this in another song. Not saying that it hasn't been done, but I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, you're right. It's very complex in that way that I don't think we usually expect from a song. Maybe like an album, like getting at a lot of different ideas and themes. Like you could see it playing out, but for a single song to cover like this much ground, you're totally right. Like I think the power of it goes beyond just like, oh, it's a commentary on capitalistic structures, where it maybe a more nuanced way of looking at it is it's like an emotional look at the effect these capitalist systems have, and how, you know, when you're in an oppressed community, when you don't have a leg up from the get-go, when you're born, when you're born into a community filled with violence and hate and destruction, and it's not getting help from anybody, you probably do follow, you look at the world, you see these capitalist structures, you see people succeeding in that way, and you think of how you could succeed within your own community. And that involves a lot of the things we see, like, you know, Larry Hoover go through, and the way Larry Hoover Jr. is looking at his dad and like what he had to deal with and the only ways his dad could possibly make it in this situation. So Kanye tells a story of a family in that kind of situation. Larry Hoover Jr. tells a real story about that situation. Jay Electronica looks at these gigantic powers that you couldn't possibly have any control over, that you could not possibly affect, unleashing these capitalistic structures onto the world and affecting places like Haiti, which probably got it worse than anybody, with the International Monetary Fund and like this pressure for them to follow it. Like it was all these things happening to the world. To like boil that all down to these little scenarios where people are just trying to break free from those systems, it gives it this emotional core that makes it go beyond just like the commentary, you know, like, oh, capitalism. It's suddenly you see how it affects people. You see it tearing families and communities apart. And you see it done in three very different, very interesting ways. You're right. It's incredible to cover that much ground in less than 9 minutes. That's impressive.
Yeah, because we know that Ye has talked about aspects of like this before, right? Like All Falls Down was very emotional and covered some similar subject matter. New Slaves was very emotional and covered some similar subject matter. You could look at Crack Music, maybe even some lines on Gorgeous, as getting at some things like this. And there is emotion when Ye raps about things like that, but they're usually... you just don't have the multiple perspectives from different voices on those songs the way that we're getting on this song, that just add so much more to the conversation. And the fact that it's part of an album that is so focused on that whole concept that's supporting it. Like All Falls Down is an important song to the College Dropout, but that album is more so about Ye's ascendancy, and All Falls Down is just more of like, okay, this is where I come from, this is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily as crucial to like what's happening on some of the later songs, right? Where Jesus Lord is just it's the core of everything that is happening on this album, and like the core of who Ye is, and getting at the core of who a lot of the features on this album are. It's just, man.
Yeah, it's very focused. Where like College Dropout, like not that it's not focused, but it is kind of like this grander tale about Kanye's ascension, and All Falls Down is more of like coloring, you know, like these little additions that like paint the community he's in and the struggles he had to deal with growing up. But it's not necessarily like crucial. It's not like the center of the album, like you're describing Jesus Lord to be. Like every song is building to this moment, and every song after it is the, Kanye in the wake of this song and thinking about like the fallout of things that happen to people. Like it's just, you're right. We keep calling it the sun and all the songs revolving around it. Like it does feel like that.
It does, man. So should we get into the lyrics?
This is gonna be. This feels like Jesus is King Part 2. Like we had to do so much like reading on like the Bible and like everything Jay Electronica is referencing. It was like, oof.
I know. It's like a lot of the time in the analysis of the lyrics, like the genius stuff can help with context in some degree. Like, hey, this might be a callback to this, or this is the specific Bible verse. And then I feel like we add a lot of, we bring a lot to the table in terms of making the connections, adding like context to things and all of that. Yeah, reaching, as some would say. Artful reaching, as some would say. But I feel like in this section, it's just like Genius is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They did some things.
They covered it for us.
Yeah, where I feel like the value add that we're bringing to the table here is that connection between Ye's verse, Jay Electronica's verse, Larry Hoover Jr., everything that we just talked about. And putting this verse in context as you're starting to see the motif of how many like wealthy groups and nations and the relationship those wealthy groups and nations have with others that they could help but end up taking advantage of in some ways. So we're going to be giving you like a broader perspective on this and the way that these lines come together. But a lot of it, like just talking about like Ertugrul.
Yeah. like you could find that information on Genius or I guess on Wikipedia if you really want to learn a lot more about it.
Yeah. So we'll have some like just straight up reading in these, but we'll make it worth your time,
We have all this like clever banter that'll come with it along the way, so that's the Washington Throne guarantee.
Clever, you say? That seems like a bold...
We at least try.
Yeah, we try. We have banter that we try to make clever. That's.
Is it often awkward and weird to be around? Yeah, sure. But, you can fast forward those parts if it really bothers you.
Yes. So start fast forwarding right now because... Well, no, don't fast forward.
No, don't.
We're getting into the lyrics, yeah. Okay, so Jay Electronica starts, "In the name of the true and living God," which is nice because we just talked about how that verse ends with like Big Bro just blacked out and all you see was the light, and whether or not that means that the Big Bro pulled the trigger or whether he had this moment of a deeper understanding or like God showing up and kind of saving him in that moment. The light referring to the light of God. And you have Ye coming in with the chorus, "Tell me if you know someone that needs Jesus Lord." So it's like that kid was someone that needed Jesus Lord, and what happens if that kid were to find Jesus? And then you have Jay Electronica coming in who's just like full on Jesus, right?
Right.
And the confidence that we see, which is in contrast to the insecurities that Ye was dealing with. And we know that Ye is someone that is down with the God, but there are times where he has struggled on this album, where he has struggled. He even describes in this verse with his grief and kind of getting misdirected at times. And it's like Jay Electronica is coming through as someone that is just like at the peak of feeling like confident and in the hands of God and bringing that energy of just like confidence and power to the verse. So him being so assured at the start of this verse is really nice in contrast to what we just got from Ye's verse.
Yeah, very much. Like where Kanye is saying, like, if you know someone who needs Jesus, like, I would like to help these people. And Jay Electronica is like giving the confidence, like, this is me living the way I do, and like this is how we should all be.
Yeah, like, you can be like me, you know?
God, I wish my voice was that cool. Oh,
he does have a great,
incredible,
like, yeah,
such natural gravitas. It's crazy.
And one of the interesting, I guess, nuances to this is that we know that Ye is very Christian. But Jay Electronica is not. Jay Electronica is a follower of Islam. So even though it's similar beliefs, same God, all of that, there's differences in the like the nuance of everything, right?
Yeah.
Which can tear some people apart, right? But Ye, I think it's really cool to have in a song that's so much about like Jesus Lord, Jay Electronica representing like Islamic beliefs on the song.
Yeah, it's great.
And that is relevant because when Jay says, in the name of the true and living God, the beneficent, the merciful, as Genius tells us, there are 99 names of Allah in Islam, and the beneficent and the merciful are two of them.
Yeah, and basically Allah is the God in Islam.
Yes. Thank you for bringing me up the rough side of the mountain like Ertugrul. So, okay, Ertugrul, 13th century Turkic Muslim warrior. And he was the father of Osman I, the first sultan of the Ottoman Empire. So he ruled over the rough and mountainous region between Anatolia and Armenia, which he had received from the Seljuk dynasty for his service in fighting against the Byzantines in the Battle of Yasekemen. He became a sort of legendary figure among the Ottomans due to his relation to Osman I. So, genius annotation.
Yeah.
Helpful there. But it just seems like with Ertugrul, there's some stories of him ruling that mountainous region, maybe traveling there. And it's just like, yeah, the rough side of the mountain. So, Jay Electronica comparing that to his upbringing, right? And the fact that he would have grown up on maybe the rough side of the city, the wrong side of the tracks, you can put that in quotes. But then that being the thing that made him legend, that's made him who he is today and made him a leader and a champion.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about his verse. It's from New Orleans, I believe. Like the idea of you growing up on the streets and taking this kind of situation that a lot of people can relate to, and the kind of situation that's talked about in both Kanye's verse and Larry Hoover Jr.'s outro, suddenly connecting that with these much bigger stories, these legendary figures, these biblical stories, like making those connections and showing that like these are the paths you can follow. Like these are the people you can be influenced by. These are the bigger things you could do. Just because you're in this spot doesn't mean you can't do things. Like whatever this guy is, Ertugrul. Yeah, that's kind of a cool part of his verse that he takes something that feels larger than life and like you couldn't possibly relate to. Like no, it's just like me. Like I grew up on the rough side of the mountain too.
Yep. Yeah, feeling that connection, right?
Yeah.
And then he grew up in the Magnolia Projects, which we talked a ton about the Magnolia Projects on Blood on the Leaves.
Yeah.
Just kind of the bed of hip hop in New Orleans, it seems. Okay. Thank you for bringing me up the rough side of the mountain like Ertugrul. Every knee bowed and every tongue confessed and paid homage. So every knee bowed and every tongue confessed might be familiar. And it's fitting. I like that Jay Electronica included this because it does come from a portion of the Bible directly, Romans 14, but Jesus is King fans will recall Jesus is Lord. So the fact that we have a Jesus is Lord reference on a song called Jesus Lord just makes the world feel right to me. You know,
makes me happy.
Yeah, that's the kind of just like continuity and like resonance that I need in my life. Where on Jesus is Lord, Ye says, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess, Jesus is Lord, Jesus is Lord. And we talked about how that song was so poignant on Jesus is King because the opening song every hour is the choir, right? No Ye, just the choir saying, you need to essentially add your voice to the choir. Sing every hour, every minute, every second, sing each and every millisecond, sing till the power of the Lord comes down. And you can view that as this group singing, and they're the ones trying to do that. But you could also feel it as like instructive. You need to sing till the power of the Lord comes down. And Ye ends the album essentially adding his voice to the choir and singing. Like every knee shall bow, every tongue confess, Jesus is Lord. And you feel that building energy in the production, almost like it's going to blow up and Jesus will come down, right? The power of the Lord is about to rain down. So it's just a nice continuity on that album. But Romans 14, where that comes from, you have the weak and the strong is the chapter heading. And it says, except the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters, which, I mean, the chorus of this song is tell me if you know someone that needs Jesus Lord, which you could think about people that may not be, who may have weak faith or no faith at all, and are in a spot where they need to find it. And this is just like, accept that person, bring them in. Which is exactly what Ye is wanting to do, is to offer Jesus and offer support to people who are in need. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not, and the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master's servants stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. So then it just gets on to more of this, like one person this, one person that. You then, why do you judge your brother or sister? Or why do you treat them with contempt? For we all stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, every tongue will acknowledge God. So then each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. So it just feels like it's very much in line with this idea of like bringing in people who need Jesus and being thoughtful and being kind.
And it really speaks to why, as problematic as it may seem for lots of other reasons, it's why Kanye brings DaBaby and Marilyn Manson out during Chicago Listening Party 3. Like everybody needs Jesus. Like we all commit these sins. We all need attention. We all can aspire for more, for better. We can all be cured. He just doesn't, there's no delineation for Kanye. I feel like everyone can be saved and we need to work together to like save everyone. Like it needs to be a communal effort. We all need to help each other. So obviously we hear Kanye talking about that in Jesus Lord. It's been a major theme on this entire album. And now Jay Electronica is talking about it, which again signals that Kanye is just very good at communicating ideas, is very in tune with Christianity and like what's expected of a Christian. And this album is just filled with messages like this.
Yes, very much so. And then there's still all that debate, right, of, do you just open arm accept anyone that needs Jesus in that way, no matter what they've done in relation to DaBaby and Manson, or like at what points do you serve justice or consequences? Right. There's a whole thing, but as you're saying, like Ye's approach just seems to be, no, let's try to embrace and save no matter what they've done. So we get that every knee bowed and every tongue confessed and paid homage. So to the monk who visited Rothschild, which is funny because Jay Electronica does kind of start to judge some people, but That's getting more into the Clintons and
those people
Bush, right?
did some massively harmful things, I think, is Jay Electronica's point. Like, there's a difference between like the person, the small person who's in a disadvantaged situation who needs help versus like Bill Clinton,
Yeah, right. Which gets at the conversation, like, where's that line, right? Yeah. But to the monk who visited Rothschilds like Thelonious did, Pananica. I didn't say that right. Pananica, thank you.
I've heard him say it like a million times.
I said Pananica. Oh my God. Pananica. Yeah. Oh my God.
It's Pananica. Tough. Like, no matter what way you say that line, like, you sound way less cool than Jay Electronica.
No, that is very true. Okay, to the monk who visited Rothschilds like Thelonious did, Pananica. That's getting at Thelonious Monk, one of the most famous jazz musicians of all time, ended up becoming friends in Paris with Baroness Pananica, nicknamed Nika, die Koningswarder. I probably did say that right. So she was part of the Rothschild family, and the Rothschilds have like endless money. Is that right?
Right.
It's just like
they got old money.
Yeah, they got that generational money. They have like a family crest.
Yeah.
What's the Rothschild net worth?
They're basically just famous for being rich as hell.
Yeah. Their family net worth is $400 billion.
Jesus.
$400 billion. Man.
Oh, God.
Okay, they created the banking empire during the 1800s.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So
okay, so part of that, so Thelonious Monk and Nika were good friends, and she ended up being the patron for a number of other jazz musicians, as Genius tells us. Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, Quincy Jones, which Quincy Jones is not a jazz musician, but
just a musician.
Just one of the most important producers in music history. But I don't know about to the monk who visited Rothschilds like Thelonious did. I don't know if like Jay Electronica is referring to himself as the monk who visited the Rothschilds.
We should have talked about this before. I was confused by this.
Yeah. Because it says like to the monk. It's almost like he's saying like, hey, I want to talk to this monk. It's Jay Elec. Like, it's me talking to you, monk, who visited the Rothschilds. But Jay Electronica also visited the Rothschilds. In quotes. He had an affair with Kate Rothschild, who is in the music industry. She's actually a senior manager at Rock Nation. So apparently he met her, and in 2012, they ended up starting an affair. And Jay and Kate dated for a little while, but then ended up breaking up. Her marriage ended over the affair. So it could be like Jay Electronica saying like, yo, I'm kind of a monk that visited the Rothschilds like Thelonious Monk did, and it's just a clever wordplay. But then following that up with it's Jay Electronica coming through your monitor.
Jay Electronica. God, the way he says it.
Donica. Yeah,
I don't know how he does it, but he makes it sound
like a Tandra. A Trodonica. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was wondering, because he says to the monk, but then like Thelonious. So like Thelonious isn't the monk he's talking about. So he must be talking about himself. Because like, I guess a monk, that's Islam, right? Gosh, I don't know. I probably sound stupid, but ultimately he must be talking about himself.
Yeah, I guess so. Does Islam have monks? No, Islam forbids the practice of monasticism.
There you go. Yeah. Sorry, everyone's screaming at me.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, Buddhist monks are the most well-known monks in a monastic order. But, I mean, it could say every knee bowed and every tongue confessed and paid homage to the monk who visited Rothschilds like Thelonious did, which would be him talking to himself. Like, they paid homage to me. I'm like the monk who visited Rothschild. But referring to himself as a monk in that way feels off then.
Yeah.
And then it feels a little like every knee bowed and every tongue confessed and paid homage. To me, that feels
I don't know if that's what he's saying,
right?
but I still think he could be talking about himself as the monk, like really propping himself up, not in an egotistical way, but in an empowering way. He's going to talk about like flying his Ducati through North America, like Wakanda, like this idea that you could have all this power as long as you have the drive and ambition to like do greater things,
Yeah. I mean, and he did like follow in the footsteps of Thelonious in some ways. So, and it could just be using it as kind of like a placeholder, There probably has been a monk who has visited the Rothschilds
right.
since, in the 200 years since they've been an established banking family. Mm-hmm. But he essentially says, like, to the monk who visited, it's Jay Electronica coming through your monitor. And that is a reference to Exhibit C, which was, I think, the big first song from Jay Electronica that came out in 2009. You think I would have found the specific part in the song where he makes this reference. Okay, it's the start of the third verse. He goes, which he made with Just Blaze, who Ye took some shots at recently. Yeah. But they call me Jay Electronica. Fuck that. They call me Jay Elec Hanukkah, Jay Elec Yamaka, Jay Elec Ramadan, Muhammad as Salam Alaikum, Razalah Sabanaha Wutala through your monitor.
Yeah.
So essentially just like a lot of religious stuff, like mixing in his name Electronica with like Hanukkah, which is a Jewish holiday, Yarmulke, which is the I guess the best description is little hats that Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people can wear all the time, but Reformed Jewish people like myself tend to only wear during Hanukkah or during like some special event where they're like, hey, put this yarmulke on. And then Ramadan being the fasting that Muslims do during the Islamic, to the 9th month of the Islamic calendar in which Muslims fast from sunup to sundown. Oh, man. Yeah. And then the other part being the Muhammad, peace be upon him, the messenger of God, may be glorious and exalted. So just kind of giving a shout out to one of the famous phrases of Islam.
So just a casual like dectuple entendre with his own name.
Right. And then through your monitor, I think is just talking to like the monitor that you have headphone monitors. Is that it? When you're in the studio, you monitor things.
Oh,
like,
yeah, right.
It's coming through. So it's not like coming through your computer monitor.
Although it is
way,
sometimes.
I mean, it can be. But
I listened to the song today on Spotify on my computer, so it was coming through my monitor.
See, look at that technology. But you have the studio monitors, like the speaker monitors, that it's a little more specific to some of the like music industry phrasing. But
oh man, he was so excited to say that line when he wrote it down. He was.
Oh yeah, just like I'm going to blow their minds by rhyming Jay Electronica with Hanukkah.
Yeah, that's the line Kanye heard and was like, "Shit, I gotta improve my Jesus Lord verse."
Yeah, Jay Elec entendre naka coming through your monitor. So just giving a callback to one of his like oldest verses, but also one that was very steeped in religion and talking about all the patting himself on the back a little bit for the entendres he's throwing out there. So back from the great beyond, like the Son of Man or the Son of Donda, which I guess the great beyond in this case would just be like, I mean, in general, it's like the great beyond is like the afterlife, right?
Sure.
But it's not like, did Jay Elect like die and come back? I don't know that in his backstory.
I don't know about that in his backstory, but obviously he's getting at like the Son of Man, the Son of Donda, this idea of like, not that Jesus is like literally reincarnated in people, but this idea that there's always people coming through and like aspiring for greater things and creating this change.
Well, like with that, I think it is referencing like the resurrection, right?
Right.
And Kanye being in the car crash and like surviving the car crash, which would be why the next line is, I never rolled the GSXR or the R6 or the Honda. So it's like I was never in the car crash like Ye was. But like Ye and Jesus both have that like similarity of like back from the great beyond. Like Kanye like almost died and is here again. Like Jesus died and is here again, I think is what he's like kind of referencing, but maybe getting into that, like what's his back from the great beyond, right? Is it just the fact that he went missing for so long? Like part of the legend of Jay Electronica is like he was going to drop his album in like 2011 and then finally didn't release his first studio album until 2020, which is kind of insane.
Interesting. So, yeah, that's a good way to think of it. I didn't make that connection with the never rolled. I just thought that meant like driving. Because everything he names in that line, they're all motorcycles. So I wasn't making that connection with Kanye, but I do like that. I mean the line could have more than one meaning, obviously, but yeah, okay, that's all interesting. You're schooling me here. I like it.
Well, I mean, it could be that like he just prefers motorcycles, so it's comparing like I never like rolled my bike the way that Ye did in a car or anything like that, so I've been like fine. But I flew my Ducati, so it's like I never had this crash, but I do fly my Ducati through North America like Wakanda.
Yeah.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I always took it as a reference to the car crash and just like giving praise to that like legend.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I never rolled the GSXR, blah, 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 but I flew my Ducati through North America like Wakanda. So this is starting to get into the global aspects that he's talking about, right? You have North America, but I imagine a focus on the United States. And then he's bringing this Ducati like it's something from Wakanda, which Wakanda is the home of the Black Panther in the Marvel universe and is often depicted or is always depicted as being this bastion of advanced science and technology.
Yeah.
Essentially in the Marvel world, it's the most advanced city on Earth. I don't know anything about Atlantis in the Marvel universe, but just Namor is kind of a jerk. But Wakanda has all this advanced technology, but people, at least in the MCU, right, the cinematic universe, people don't know it exists for a long time, until the end of the Black Panther movie. So that's supposed to be like, oh, everybody's going to discover that Africa actually has this crown jewel of technology in the world. But there's that contrast between Africa often being seen as having mostly third world countries that don't have a lot of technology, and then Wakanda being this like home of advanced technology.
Yeah, right.
So Jay Electronica is bringing that kind of dynamic. Like I have this advanced thing, my Ducati, that can fly, as if it's from Wakanda. I'm bringing that to North America, which you could probably start to read into some implications of that, and what that could apply to in terms of just like the impact Black culture has had on American society and American pop culture.
For sure,
yeah.
And just like, again, connecting himself with like this greater entity, Wakanda, the Black Panther. Like you have just as much power as those people. It's not just some story you've heard, you know?
Right. Like it's infusing you in how you behave and how you go about your day to day.
Yeah.
And then earthquakes will strike this nation for what Bush did to Rwanda, which this is when we start to get to some of the larger aspects, right? It's already like imperialism, which is what we're talking about when we're saying what Larry Hoover Jr. was saying with the conditions of this capitalist society is what made him. That's talking about the impact of capitalism on an individual. And now Jay Electronica is talking about the impact of capitalism on a nation. and on cultures, not just the individual, but on individuals that make up a collective and whole.
Right.
So Bush is representative of one American regime and the Rwandan genocide that has gone on for, HW, right? Sorry.
Oh yeah, just because I know like George Bush, I feel like George W. Bush tried to like in his presidency like tried to make up for it. Like there were all these like, you know, symbolic acts he did, like going to Rwanda graves and stuff, and all because like, you know, his dad really botched it and like contributed to this mass genocide. It was crazy.
Yeah, they say that as many as 1.1 million
Insane.
died, which is just, so there's like a whole Wikipedia thing you can get into about the American administration led by George H.W. Bush and how they like funded and offered like political support to the group that led this genocide, which is just kind of insane. And then what the Clintons did to Haiti, which is getting into the aftermath of the Haitian earthquake. And Bill Clinton was special envoy to Haiti, and Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. So both of them were in key positions in terms of the United States helping out Haiti. And some of the details that are provided is that the Interim Haiti Recovery Commission ended up getting $6.04 billion that was donated from governments across the world. And it says 9% went to the Haitian government, and a measly 0.6% went to local organizations. So the rest of it went to like
sounds about
paying everybody else. So it's like if the United States sent in soldiers to help, a lot of money went back to the United States for providing that assistance. But I'm imagining where a lot of the issue comes from is you wonder how good of a job that accounting was, or how accurate the accounting was. Like, did anybody inflate, like, oh, I'm a private contractor and I provided this to Haiti, give me $2 million.
One thing this Gene of Sanitation doesn't get into, and while it's totally right to bring up the earthquake stuff, especially since Jay Electronica is about to talk about an earthquake, or he did talk about an earthquake, which is why it really applies. But also, back when Bill Clinton was president, and Haiti had its first democratically elected president, who was then ousted by a military coup. I guess George H.W. Bush, it's funny because like Bush is involved in both Haiti and Rwanda. So back when this guy was elected in Haiti, the first democratically elected president, George H.W. Bush did not like this guy and was all for this coup that overthrew him. But then when Clinton came into power, he agreed to restore this guy back to power. And it was more of a like PR move, kind of, because he also did not want this guy to be in power. And they got this guy to commit to not seeking re-election in the next election. So in the next election, another party won, and they were suddenly friends with this new president of Haiti. So they look good for restoring the old president, and then like are friends with the new one, who's just who they really wanted in there. Because this new guy decided that Haiti would become part of the International Monetary Fund, which is where I think some of the capitalism talk really comes into play here. Because, you know, the International Monetary Fund, it's this giant thing, and it's headquartered in the U.S. and everything. And the idea is to slash unemployment, you know, and build a nation up. But it did the opposite in Haiti. You know, it created mass unemployment. Like all these rice farmers lost their farms. They got rid of all of these handouts, as people would call them, that people got. And then because Haiti was in such a bad place because of all of these terrible policies, people elected the old president, the first president that had party, came back into power, and Clinton cut off all aid to them, all financial aid. And then Bush, who, like his father, also did not like this new party, continued not giving Haiti any benefits. And so, yeah, that's just in addition to all of the earthquake stuff, like they were part of this massive, and during that time too, They invaded Haiti with their military. We invaded Haiti, like, I think 3 times in the 20th century. So, like, we are just all up in their business, enacting all of these policies that did not help them. It's all mixed up in there.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and these are the things that you could, like, never realize that your government is doing and the impact it is having. And you wonder, like, I mean, I don't wonder, but I'm sure there's some people that wonder. I did wonder at a point in my life when I was like 16, 17, being like, why don't other countries like us?
Yeah. And if you're wondering, Obama continued all of these policies as well.
Which, I mean, you could see somebody arguing like maybe they know more than us and there's like something to it, but it seems like there's maybe a better way.
And this is so, even especially striking for Jay Electronica to bring this up, because Kanye's been in Haiti and been working with the president, and I don't know, he wants to be on the ground floor of helping this nation that we have just been fucking over for decades. It's again showing the power of the individual. It's great.
Which is kind of sad that in the aftermath of Ye going to Haiti and meeting with the Haitian president, the president was assassinated. Yeah. I mean, not like immediately after, not because of that, but just like some months after he became more of a known figure to those in the Kanye community. Since Kanye had met with him, you just see that there's still political unrest in this country that it sounds like has been going on for decades now.
Oh, just to add, I hate to add on like to all the sadness that's involved with Haiti and like all the harm we've caused, but so many people have tried to seek refuge from Haiti to the U.S. and are just met by, our Coast Guard blockade. And a lot of people end up dying trying to get around that. It's just a terrible situation.
It's really sad, man. Okay. And then it doesn't get better with, and Downing Street did to Ghana. Downing Street is the euphemistic term, the nickname for the government of England. Mm-hmm. I think the Parliament House is on Downing Street kind of thing. So Genius says, at the height of the British Empire in the 20th century, the UK controlled colonies in Africa spanning 20 present-day nations, one of which was the Gold Coast colony, which would become the nation of Ghana in 1960. As a colony, the region was exploited for profit, leaving many of its people impoverished. And I'm sure that that's an overview that doesn't do justice.
I was looking through the Wikipedia page today because I don't know a lot about that. And it just seems like, man, just all these little things that a larger nation can do to a place that's trying to build itself up and like trying to find itself. It's kind of sickening.
Yeah, the way they just exploit, which, I mean, in that sense, like, Ghana was just a tool for a capitalistic society in that sense, right? Like, there's no humanity to it. It's just business, which is why the phrase "is just business" is so toxic.
Right.
Because it gets to the core of a capitalistic mindset that is already dehumanizing.
Yes.
And you just use it to justify elements of dehumanization that shouldn't probably be there.
Right.
But so, you get this like blown up perspective in terms of like American and British relations with like historically black countries and the way in which these white nations have taken advantage of black nations. Yeah.
And then and I like how, I flew my Ducati through North America, like Wakanda, earthquakes will strike this nation. Like, it's almost like Jay Electronica, like, in addition to, comparing himself to like Black Panther, is like, like the power of his words will create earthquakes, or like he's on this, like what an earthquake will do to these people that have impoverished me and so many other nations. Like they're going to be part of they're going to experience my wrath, our wrath. Like the earth is on our side.
Yeah, there'll be a reckoning,
Yeah.
And then he continues on with like oh my goodness, I should have looked how to say it before. Topazidlin?
Sure.
Topaz.
I don't remember this one.
Oh my goodness.
I just know Terremoto.
Yeah. Topazidlin. I can't say it. I'm so sorry, Spanish speakers, Mexico listeners. It's a town in Mexico which is important to the Aztec culture. So getting at the same way that he's talking about like African cultures that have a long history, now he's getting at some of the Mexican cultures that have a long history in terms of making a reference to the Aztecs. So they call me terremoto, which is earthquake, right? So the same way that he just said earthquakes will strike this nation, he is now taking on the moniker of earthquake.
Right.
And then El Negro Loco is crazy black man.
Yeah.
So it's just like, he's impassioned, he's intense, he can cause earthquakes. His voice is powerful, and that's exactly what he says. Like all of that's implied in the nickname, and then he delivers that with, I shake the tectonic plates of the game if I lay one vocal. Ooh. Yeah, it's a big deal. If anybody says they have Jay Electronica on their album, it's just like, oh, really? You have a Jay Electronica verse? Which, just because of his inability to release an album, has made him the stuff of legend.
Love it.
Yeah, but he delivers when he's like doing features, and I really did like a written testimony. It was just funny that it was essentially Jay-Z being like, man, we're finishing this album, like just write one verse per song and I will write the second verse and we will release this album.
Yeah.
So okay, the god is interstellar while you fellows remain local. So just like, yeah, seems like a little more of a traditional filler line in that sense of just like, I'm this and you're that, or God's this and you're that.
It keeps in line with parts of the album where Kanye has talked about that, and like, these people are doing this and this is hurting the community and hurting the country, hurting the music industry, the rap genre, and I'm doing these things. Like, you got to get on my level.
Yeah, like y'all just are thinking local while like God's interstellar, and because I'm someone that is in the name of the true and living God, I'm much more interstellar than you.
Yeah, again, very inspiring. Not to think that like you are confined to your situation. Like, you can think bigger than that, and you can have a bigger impact.
Yeah, you don't have to just be local. You can go global, and that's it's one of those cool things, because we've been talking about how this verse itself goes much more global rather than staying local, and how cool that is, and he seems to be aware of that.
Yeah. Before we move on, suddenly your voice is very weird on my end. I just want to make sure your mic's okay.
Mic is looking fine.
Okay, great. It's just on my end, then that's not a big deal.
Okay.
I'll just, if you see me making a weird facial expression, it's because Chris sounds like a Muppet over here.
Oh man, hopefully that's not happening on the episode. I'm not seeing anything weird in the...
It's probably fine.
Okay, well, if not...
It'll be a fun little piece of Watching a Throne history.
Yeah, so...
Oh, now you sound fine now.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, so he follows that up with, the god is interstellar while you fellows remain local. My bars is like the pyramid temples of Pakal Votan. I hope I said that right.
I feel bad I'm making you say everything.
Yeah. So this is a reference, as Gina says, to the pre-Columbian Mesoamerican civilization. Or continuing the references to pre-Columbian Mesoamerican civilization, Pakal Votan is the name sometimes used for Pakal the Great, the 7th century lord of the Maya city of Palenque?
Yeah.
Palenque? The Maya are well known for their iconic stepped pyramids, one of them being the Temple of Inscriptions, the construction of which was initiated by Pakal. The structure was finished after his death, and he was buried there. Jay is saying that his bars will be a figurative grand structure to house his spirit long after his death. Yeah. So we had the reference to the Aztec civilization, right? And now we have a reference to the Mayan civilization, which two civilizations, it should be noted, that were essentially destroyed by European settlers that came through searching for gold. And instead of trying to make connections with these incredible civilizations that had already been around and like been building some awesome things, they just ravaged them, which is a huge shame, but plays into, if you're wondering why he's referencing like Mayans and Aztecs, it's just because they're in line with some of what European settlers and European powers did to Africa as well.
Yeah, and Rwanda, Haiti, Ghana, all that.
Yeah, Caribbean. Yep. So, yeah, my bars is like the pyramid temples of Pakal. So with that context from Genius, yes, like the bars are going to be his legacy, right? I don't think it's going to be the grand structure to house his spirit, but you have these things that remain long after the person has passed on, and people are going to be returning to Jay Electronica's bars. You hope for decades, centuries, lifetimes after his passing.
Right.
As sure as the DOJ confirmed Ezekiel's wheel, I could change the world like Jacob with 2 pieces of steel.
Yeah.
So Ezekiel's wheel comes from Ezekiel 1, which is a Bible book that I somehow got rid of in my tabs.
Old Testament.
Yeah, like you're getting back into the old school stuff. Where did that go? Okay. And it's essentially just the basis for a lot of like UFO Bible conspiracies.
Yes.
Yeah, there's as Genius says, it refers to an angelic entity of flying wheels in chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel, which illustrates the omnipresence and divine essence of God. So because there are these like wheeled objects, which, a wheel is essentially a circle, most UFOs are just like disc-shaped, wheel-shaped objects in the sky. It's caused people, and angels are in the sky. So you have like wheeled things in the sky in the Bible. You have all these people that are just like,
yeah, right,
aliens, UFOs. It's a basis for a ton of conspiracies. But there were videos that, what he's referring to, the Department of Justice declassified videos from like 2007, 2008, I think, where in different instances, the Air Force had encounters with unidentified flying objects that behaved in ways that defied the known physics of flying objects, like military jets and stuff, like just dancing all around of a size and speed that didn't align with any animal that you would find in the sky, and didn't align with any known technology or vehicle that you'd find in the sky.
Right.
And I remember when the videos first leaked, and they're like a huge deal as they're like leaking on YouTube, but people are like, oh, these are unconfirmed, who knows if they're real or not. And then like a decade later, the Department of Justice finally was just like, yeah, here, have them. We have no idea. Like, we have no explanation. So if you haven't seen them, they are pretty just like, what?
Yeah, right.
So that's essentially him saying like the DOJ confirmed Ezekiel's wheel. Like they confirmed UFOs, and he's grounding that as like the Bible also talked about UFOs.
Right.
And which also refers back to like the God is interstellar, right? Interstellar, outer space, UFOs being from outer space and aliens and all of that. So he kind of sets up the bar a couple lines ahead of time. And then people often have conspiracies of like pyramids and aliens as well. So I don't know if that was necessarily intended, but it's just cool that you have the interstellar line, then pyramids, and then Ezekiel wheel. Yeah.
I like that DOJ confirmed Ezekiel's wheel, because like Ezekiel's wheel refers to like God's omnipresence, like there are these things we don't understand, and like there are things going on in the sky that he is maneuvering, and this idea like the DOJ confirmed it, like it's a reality, like it's just part of this reality, and I'm just maneuvering within it, which leads to the next line, that he could change the world like Jacob with 2 pieces of steel, that he can go out and create. He can work within this divine structure.
Yeah, I like that, because it's not only are they confirming aliens, right, or like unidentified flying objects, but if you think of unidentified flying objects as like have to do with God,
what's
right?
referenced in the Bible,
wheel, yeah, then they confirm the presence of God.
Yes. Some
cool.
heavy shit right there.
Yeah, right. And then I could change the world like Jacob with 2 pieces of steel. So purely, I didn't know
about this either.
Yeah, so in the Nation of Islam, Jacob is a black scientist who created white people. At the age of 6, Jacob discovered the laws of attraction and repulsion with 2 pieces of steel, leading to his eventual work to the creation of the white race.
Yeah.
So,
and I read about it because I didn't know about it either. And, you don't know how to like take stuff like that. But I was reading, and like Nation of Islam, they accept this. Like they say like there's scientific evidence for this kind of stuff. Like it's fully what they believe. And I'm not trying to call it crazy or anything, but to hear something like this and not know about it, like it's just a very interesting part of what they believe.
Yeah, it's always like any faith, like any group, once you start getting into like the nuance of what they believe, you're always going to have some things where you're like, I really like that, and some things where you're like, huh?
Yeah, that's one of them.
Yep. And then Ezekiel's Wheel was also a song on A Written Testimony, which like it starts with an interlude going, we interrupt this recording to bring you a special bulletin. Reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed. We switch you now to our spot reporter downtown. This is John Cameron, downtown. Pardon me, madam, would you tell our audience, what would you do if the saucer were to land? So even that song, he starts to make that connection between UFOs and Ezekiel's Wheel and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess change the world like Jacob with 2 pieces of steel. Jacob invented 2 races, so I guess from the steel discovering like repulsion and attraction, and Jay's saying like my sword and my microphone are going to be my 2 pieces of steel, the things I create, like my attraction and repulsion, right? The microphone, I'm guessing, would be what attracts, and the sword would be the repulsion.
I don't know. We should ask him when he comes on the show.
Right. Like art and violence, like art and justice, like mercy and justice kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I swore to the Christ's throne, essentially what, like, I have dedicated myself to God.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you grade, they want to say you took a L, Jose Castillo, which Jose Castillo, I remember watching this fight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, back in 2002. It was Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Jose Castillo. We got it, like, there's a period in high school where we had an illegal cable box. They gave us all the pay-per-view channels and everything. And during boxing matches, some of people from the baseball team would like come over. So there was one with like, I think Holyfield or Lennox Lewis had a big fight during this time that we all watched. And then there was the Floyd Mayweather, Jose Castillo fights that we all watched. And just being like, he won. Like, what? Floyd Mayweather didn't do anything the whole fight.
Didn't Mayweather like agree? Like Mayweather was the one pushing for a rematch because he like thought the results were like they weren't legit.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
I think so, if I'm remembering it right. But they did fight again, and then Mayweather won the second time.
Just like, yeah. It was like, you want to see me win? You want to see me win?
Yeah.
Okay, fine, I'll win. Yeah, but so they want to, when you grade, so like Jose Castillo, like a lot of people think he won, but they gave him the L. So it's like, but when you grade, they want to say you took an L. So he just makes that comparison to like, even though I'm a winner, there are going to be people that say I'm the loser.
Yeah, and that like when you're great, people want you to lose, so they just like say you lost, even though you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, right. They look forward to it. They'll say it. And he says, I'm in the fight here for what seemed like light years, which I wonder if that's why Ye makes a reference to like Buzz Lightyear.
Maybe.
Or if it's just a nice coincidence.
I mean,
but it's like,
he does also mention Wakanda, which Kanye mentions in the previous song. Like, I don't know, maybe Jay heard Kanye's album before he wrote this whole verse.
yeah,
or Kanye's just
maybe,
copying Jay Electronica.
yeah, maybe Ye heard like Jay Electronica's verse and was like, "Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna refer to that." But you do have the childish. We talked about how like the Buzz Lightyear, "I'm reaching for the stars" like Buzz Lightyear is coming from Ye reflecting on his childhood, and now Jay Electronica, who's talking about the fight he's in as an adult. You have the idea of like Buzz Lightyear and how like much of an inspiration he can be to like adult Jay Electronica being like, yo, this fight is taking light years.
Yeah, right.
And I'm in a fight here also plays off on like my sword and my microphone, right? Like he's in a fight, which is why he has a sword, but he's also like part of the battle is taking place through music.
In the boxing match.
And the boxing match. So a nice little like triptych again.
Yeah.
Same thing with like God is Interstellar and Pyramids and Ezekiel's Wheel. My rugged cross and thorny crown squeeze out Christ tears, which,
God.
yeah.
These lines.
A well-placed adjective is one of the most powerful things in writing. So like my cross and crown squeeze out Christ tears is still like evocative and effective, but my rugged cross and thorny crowns squeeze out Christ tears. Just it becomes much more tactile.
Right.
Like you could feel the wood grain of the cross and then like the points of the crown, which is getting at like Christ's crucifixion, right? Mm-hmm. He's on the wooden cross. They put the crown of thorns on him as he's crucified. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's just like this fight is a sacrifice, right? He is fighting this fight now, so hopefully others don't have to in the future. And hopefully there's like resurrection and redemption and all of that. And he's crying tears the same way that Christ was because he's just like overwhelmed in terms of that idea of like dying for the sins of others and like being this kind of figure. And then 30 pieces of silver clouts, my Pierre price tier. So this comes from the story of Matthew, which is getting at the crucifixion, right? So what's his name? Judas. Judas is the one that ends up telling the officials where Jesus is, and he got paid 30 pieces of silver. So it specifically happens in Matthew 14. Judas agrees to betray Jesus. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, is that how you say it?
Wait,
went to
what
the
word?
Chief. Judas's last name.
Oh, I don't know.
Iscariot?
Hell if I know.
Iscariot. Went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. And then the Last Supper happens. Jesus predicts Peter's denial when they come to arrest Jesus. Jesus is just like, nah, Peter, you're going to bitch out. Mm-hmm. And Peter does. And then Jesus ends up arrested, and then everything with the crucifixion. But 30 pieces of silver was essentially like the clout, right? So that's all that Judas got for the sacrifice. And it's like you have people here that are trying to say that Jay Electronica or others like Jay Electronica will take L's. They'll be haters, and they will try to tear these artists and these people down online just for like clout. Is essentially all that these haters are going to be getting. And it's like, does it feel good to betray like someone or even betray like your people all for some like worthless clouts?
Right. So what do you make of my Pierre price tier then?
I have no idea. I mean, generally you need to know who Pierre is And is he referring to somebody? I don't think there's a Pierre in the Bible, right?
I assumed it was talking about the Pierre Hotel in New York, which is like this really, luxurious hotel. Like you have to be in this price tier to be able to stay here. But when I thought of it that way, it still didn't make sense of the line.
Yeah, I looked up Pierre Bible, and that brought me to the French Wikipedia for Saint Peter.
Oh, I like that.
But if it is like the Pierre price tier, which I mean, there's also the Pierre born producer, but I don't think as like beloved as Pierre is becoming, I don't think he's big enough necessarily at this point to be getting like that kind of like price tier shout out. Like, oh, it's the price tier of like Pierre born production. Like it would be like Pharrell or like
right.
Ye himself would be like the upper echelons of a producer's price tier. So yeah, maybe like you get the 30 pieces of silver clouts, and that's what allows you could use that to stay at a nice hotel. I don't know.
Yeah, strange line, but the way he says it is really cool.
Yeah, my Pierre price tier.
Yeah, price
or maybe
tier.
I mean, you could view it as like a bounty. I mean, that's what essentially Judas got for like trading Jesus in. That was essentially
right.
the value that they put on Jesus. So it could be something like he's saying that's like just like the price tier that they put me in. And maybe that was considered a lot back then. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess just relating to like the bounty that would be on Jay Electronica.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then it's a war outside. It's a war outside. It's like the last days of Sodom and Gomorrah outside, which I love. I love the reference because Sodom and Gomorrah were cities that were just like bastions of sin in the Bible, right?
Right.
Like just all kinds of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll going on, but also like murder and
right,
not
that's
just like party. Yeah, it's just like the worst of society essentially in these cities, and they were destroyed
by God.
God just was like, you know what?
Fuck you guys.
No. Yeah, y'all have kind of been like fucking around for too long, so here's a fireball. Like you're all
you know what? Here's 40 fireballs.
Yeah, it's just like the cities get destroyed, and it's supposed to be this big whatchamacallit?
Cleansing.
Yeah, a big cleansing that happened. So in this verse that is so focused on the way in which nations exploit other nations, and in the idea of how the wealthy exploit the poor, essentially Jay Electronica is just pointing out like this reckoning is going to happen. Like nations are going to pay for what they've been doing. Like it's not just going to be that you're able to get away with everything that's happened, which is, I can see some people being like upset by that. Like, are you talking about the like end of America? Do you
right.
want our country to fail? And there's like an anti-patriotism to that. But I could also view it as like there's the actual patriotism of no, I don't want America to fail. I want this government to fail, and like better policies and practices and like a better way forward to emerge.
Yeah, him saying it's a war outside, like he's part of this fight to like make things better. Like, and you're right, like these powers that be are they're going to be the ones that fall. The people will prevail.
Yeah, it's essentially like the people over the powers.
Yes.
Which then gets to like everything in Larry Hoover Jr. in terms of the way in which like the powers that be try to keep the people down, try to keep the families disconnected, which is something that like Ye has talked about in the Drink Champs interview, the way in which families get separated and disconnected and how unempowering that is. And that there's something like much more powerful when people are able to stay together, and how societies tend to be structured in a way to keep people from accruing that sense of like power and togetherness. So I think that's getting into, or leads nicely into, Larry Hoover Jr. and this like plea for like, let our family be whole.
Yeah.
Right. Let our people be whole. Like, let us like have a new way forward rather than keeping us in bondage.
Yeah, totally. And like literally in bondage. He's talking about his dad in jail and speaking to this larger conversation of the 13th Amendment and how people were imprisoned in this capitalist society and how just things are inherently unfair for people and we're thrown into these situations and we're treated just like slaves. It's all wrapped up into that idea.
Yep. In anything more on Jay Electronica or into Larry Hoover Jr.?
Oof, no, it only took us an hour and 20 minutes to get through that one verse. Jeez.
That's all.
That's it.
That's all. So for Larry Hoover Jr., I think this will go faster. We get like, what up, Ye? So this is the next one in the line of like phone calls that Ye has on albums, right? Thinking back to, oh my goodness.
Well, you got Nicki Minaj
on Violent Crimes, and then Max B.
Max B, of course.
On Silver Surfer Intermission.
Yeah. So this is the third in the trilogy of those.
Yeah, hopefully not the last.
Oh,
but
please no.
Definitely the most serious.
This is my inspiration to get Kanye's number and leave a voicemail that someday will be used on a song.
Yeah, just be like, hey, do you want to be on our podcast? And then the album's just called No, and is 18 tracks where Ye just says no.
Yeah, exactly. That's the most likely scenario.
It'd be over the top way to reject us, but I'd be all for it.
I'd be honored.
Yeah. So we get What Up, Ye? This Larry Hoover Jr. First and foremost, I want to thank you for taking the fight for my father to the Oval Office, which is referring to 2018 when Ye went to see Trump in the Oval Office. There was a lot made of that as Ye got into a multitude of topics, but one of the ones that he brought up was like, we need to get Larry Hoover out of prison, like get Larry Hoover out of prison, which in the aftermath seemed to be some saying like the main reason Ye was trying to befriend Trump and went to the White House and all of that.
I mean, yeah, he was there. Anyone could focus on, which when I say anyone, I just mean like the media and the way it's presented, is kind of, like running around the office, like talking really loud, shouting over everyone, hugging Trump. The fact that he hugged Trump was so unforgivable that you couldn't listen to anything that he was saying. And what he was actually talking about was the 13th Amendment, was Larry Hoover Jr. or Larry Hoover, and how, how disenfranchised so many people are and how they're thrown into these situations, and how Larry Hoover like doesn't deserve to be in prison for this long. He served his time, and like releasing him would be this symbolic gesture that like we're moving past this problem and that we're going to work on it. That's everything there Kanye was there to talk about.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't remember in part one or just kind of like catching up, Larry Hoover Jr. was sentenced to prison in 1973. Larry Hoover Sr.
We keep doing that.
Sorry. Yeah, Larry Hoover Sr. was sentenced to prison in 1973 after he, what's the word? He made the call to have someone else carry out a murder on the streets. So there was a drug dealer who had some kind of like issue with Larry Hoover's group, and Hoover was just like, take him out. Yeah. So both Andrew Howard, who did the killing, and Larry Hoover were arrested, and they were sentenced to 150 to 200 years in prison, which is an extraordinary amount. And there's some people that are just like, well, if you are doing that, then life in prison makes sense. And there are others that would make the argument that context matters, right? And in this case, as Larry Hoover Jr. starts to say, it's like he was the byproduct of culture and society of that time forcing him into this life. And should he still be in prison at this point, like 20...
Right.
What? 1973?
Yeah,
like
40 years later?
Yeah, which...
50.
Yeah,
oh my God,
yeah.
50. Can I do math?
83, 93, 2003. Yep.
On top of that, a big reason that sentence was so gigantic was all of these other crimes they convicted him of, which were mostly like stuff like money laundering, like economical crimes, which if you live in America, you know that a lot of people commit crimes like that and barely serve any time in prison. So it's just this scenario where like it's a black man, like it feels symbolic that like they're making him serve all this time that so many privileged people don't have to serve.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So some of the context there, but Larry Hoover Jr. says, you might not have been the only one that could have did that, but you were the one that did do that. And with your assistance, we can continue to let the world take part in this fight. And in the aftermath of this speech and this album, we've had Jay Prince, who's one of the like heavy hitters of the rap world. Even if other people don't realize that, anybody that's in the rap space knows the importance of Jay Prince. And Jay Prince was the one that discovered Drake. He was actually the first manager for Floyd Mayweather Jr. If that tells you anything.
Wow.
Yeah. So he has gone on record now of saying that like Drake and Ye are going to work together on Larry Hoover, and just had Kanye yesterday release a statement while standing next to Jay Prince being like, yo, Drake, I'm calling for an end to our feud. Let's do a benefit concert in December to get Larry Hoover out of jail. So things in the aftermath of this song are continuing to take shape. So the song isn't just like, what a good song. It's actively becoming potentially part of history.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it kind of feels like me and my mother, my brothers, and my kids have all been incarcerated through this journey, which in some ways gets back to the story that Ye tells about you have the youngest child or the little brother die in the song, and the way that it affects the entire family, how it impacts the mom, how it impacts the sister, how it impacts the big brother. And you have Larry Hoover Jr. here saying the same thing. It's my father that's incarcerated, but by proxy, it's like myself, my brothers, my kids, my mom all feel like we are suffering because of it.
Let's not forget the first song on this album is called Jail. You know, it Kanye really has been playing. I mean, he's been talking about it for a while. If you think of mental slavery, or if you think of him just speaking in general about how disenfranchised and how not having a leg up can affect you so much, like being born into such a impoverished situation. It's all part of Kanye's bigger picture talking, but on this album specifically, thinking it's starting with jail and feeling like you can't even break out of your own tiny little situation. Like, how are you going to make any sort of bigger impact if you can't even get past that? You know, getting people to get past that point is almost even a bigger fight. And that's exactly what Larry Hoover Jr. is talking about here.
I think there's some larger implications too, to that idea of the song's called Jail, and we see now that if you're in jail, the way it affects the people that love you, that are in your life. And it's like, you could imagine Ye essentially saying like, because I've in jail by society or by my own doing, that's had an impact on my wife, my kids, my family and loved ones. It hasn't just affected me when you put me in jail, but it's affected like my entire like life and the people around me, which then puts like Never Abandon Your Family, which didn't make the album, but might be on the deluxe since it was on the stem player, in even starker contrast. Or song like Come to Life into even starker contrast. Like,
yeah, totally. I mean, No Child Left Behind, like all the larger implications of that song and who you're saving and how big of an impact you can have. I mean, all that. And
like, Ye needs to be out of jail so he can do right by his family, so he can get his life in order.
Right.
Okay, and we haven't even been to jail. We have been looked at and treated as criminals, in just the stigma, right? You have Hoover as your last name, and people are going to look at you a certain way. For being a part of this family. My father's truth and the reality that he raised me in is that he wanted to make a change in this community. And at that point you hear, "Tell me if you know someone that needs," which is just nicely placed. Because the conditions in this capitalist society is what made him and is what made the children of today. Yeah. After 25 years of being locked down, 23-1. So Larry Hoover has been in prison since 1973, but there was a second investigation that took place. It was a 17-year investigation that was looking at the continuing criminal enterprise for leading the gang from state prison. And because of that, in the mid-90s, they took away essentially like Larry Hoover's access. He ended up being put into isolation at this point. So his sentence not only got longer, but it got harsher in terms of how they were treating him, because they thought that he was still leading the gang from prison. So they isolated him. So it's not just the fact that like, oh, he's only been in prison for 20 years. No, he's been in prison for 50 years, but he's been locked down 23 hours of the day for 25 years.
And one thing I want to add, thinking about that, like this intense prison sentence and being alone for that long, and the idea of the family also feeling incarcerated. The one little effect they really did on this to Larry Hoover Jr.'s voicemail here is like all of his words have an echo and like they reverberate. So it kind of does feel like he's in a cell. Like I wonder if that's a purposeful effect they put on his voice just for that reason.
Oh, that's interesting. I could see it happening. Yeah, I was wondering, during the song you also hear breath at times being like
yeah, right.
And I was just like, oh, is this like God breathed on this? Is this like the breath of life? Is this like the spirit like come to life?
I wouldn't put it past Kanye.
Yeah. Okay, so my father has not called any shots from one of the most secure and segregated prisons in the world. So, and will not, once released, call any shots for the gangster disciples, the GDs. This is essentially like, yeah, for the last 25 years, he hasn't been doing the thing that you arrested him for. Like, he's no longer going to be a problem because he's not going to, I mean, how old is he now? 73?
Oof, gosh.
70. So it's like, he's not going to be like running around, like committing crimes. He's not going to be leading like a gang that's committing crimes. Like, and Larry Hoover Jr. says, if my father's intentions were to lead us to death, destruction, into the hell that he has had to live in for the past 26 years, man, he would be dead to me. Like, yeah, if he was going to be trying to continue to lead a criminal organization that's just going to get other youths arrested and jailed, like, no, like that's not the man that Larry Hoover Jr. is going to support. I didn't sign up for that. I didn't stay on this journey this long for that all my life, man. So it talks about like the journey for this long and causes him to step back and reflect. I've been waiting for my father to come home. And like Larry Hoover Jr. is how old?
I mean, he's got to be around 50, right?
Yeah. Larry Hoover Jr. age. Come on, quick Wikipedia. Nope, it's just telling me Larry Hoover. It's just everything about okay. Larry Hoover. Yeah.
A long time.
Yeah, a long time. So I've been waiting for my father to come home. They told me when I graduate 8th grade, he would be home. Then they told me when I graduate from high school, he would be home. I went away to Morris Brown. I graduated, and he still ain't home. So at this point, like 8th grade, you're 12 years old kind of thing, 12, 13. And then by the time you're graduating college, you're 21, 22. So it's been almost a decade. And then he goes, now I'm an adult and my daughter went away to college and graduated. So you imagine if he had a kid, you know, right after college, that's another 25 years or like 22 years. He's still not home. Now, even more than that, my son, he graduated 8th grade and we still waiting. And that brings it full circle, right? Like the same way that Larry Hoover Jr. was just like, oh, when I graduate 8th grade, like my dad will be home. And now his own son's graduating 8th grade and the son's grandfather, Larry Hoover Jr.'s father, still isn't home.
Yeah. I mean, getting even more commentary on the generational stuff that has been such a big part of this album, because Kanye's been speaking it mostly in a positive light, like the impact you can have from generation to generation. This shows the hurt and pain that can be caused from generation to generation.
Yep. You can either have something that lifts people up over the course of decades and lifetimes, or something that continues to impact people over the course of decades and lifetimes. Right. Matter of fact, he hasn't hugged, kissed, or touched any of his grandchildren, because they're all born after the 23andMe, right? And they haven't been able to touch their grandfather, even though it is not seen that way for some of us. But for many of us, Larry Hoover is a beacon of hope for his community, who deserves to breathe free air. Free my father. And then right after Free My Father, you get that last Jesus, and then Mr. Larry Hoover Sr., Lord, which,
Epic.
I mean, the implications of that, right? Like, tell me if you know someone that needs Jesus, Lord. And it's like, Larry Hoover is someone that could use, like, mercy and grace, and, like, it's just someone have some compassion in this situation. It's just such a payoff for the whole song and the whole build. And I mean, I know that there are people that will probably think of the Larry Hoover Jr. voicemail as similar to the Chris Rock portion of Blame Game, just in terms of it's an addendum to the song, and maybe some people will skip it. But I think it's such an important, I think I even thought when I initially heard this, like, there's no way I'm going to listen to the voicemail every time I listen to Jesus Lord.
You have to.
But I do. Like, yeah, it hits, it ties everything together. It's important not just to the song, not just to larger aspects outside of this album, but still important to the album itself and understanding. Like, if you understand why this is on the album, then you understand the album.
Right.
And if you don't understand why this is on the album, or can't appreciate why it's on the album,
then you probably wrote a review of this album.
Yeah, you're probably a professional music critic and should change professions.
I mean, I completely agree. Of all the songs in this album because I listen to this album when I go on runs often, and of all the songs in this album that you think could, like, hype you up and, like, make you run faster, like make you run well, this song, of all the songs, probably hits me the hardest, and the outro doesn't affect it at all. If anything, I'm like, you're impassioned listening to this. There's just so much power and gravitas and realness to it. I mean, you're listening to someone who's actually struggling and conveying that struggle and conveying this desire to fix something that seems unfixable, yet you feel like you're on the cusp of doing it. Like, we keep progressing forward, like, you keep making these little changes, and, like, freeing Larry Hoover Sr. would be this, like, monumental step. It's just this case where, like, it feels too big to actually accomplish, but, like, you could do it if you keep trying, and you know enough people rally around it. It's just so powerful to see somebody in the throes of that, who's at the head of that, on an album that's going to be heard by millions of people. I mean, it's incredible.
One of the things that I don't think we've talked about in detail yet is the parallels between Larry Hoover and Donda.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that.
Right. And it's just, in Ye's verse, you have, like, my mom's passed away and I won't be able to see her again unless, like, I'm gone. And the heaviness of that. And then you have Larry Hoover Jr. that's like, my dad's essentially gone, but I am trying to get him back. Like, he can see his dad again, like, in this life, on this earth, but you have, like, a justice system that some would argue was unfair towards Larry Hoover, like, keeping the two separated, which is why Jay Electronica's verse is so important to this, because it starts to get into the government aspects that cause these issues. So it really does work as connective tissue between these verses, but just having that dynamic of both Ye and Larry Hoover Jr. missing their parents and the way that's impacting them and the way in which they're trying to connect. And essentially this is like the Larry Hoover Donda chant, right? You're saying Larry Hoover's name enough times and trying to make enough people aware of the name that something happens, the same way that you're saying like Donda, 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 and then Donda appears on track 15, right? Like she's there, like her presence is there, like
damn, No Child Left Behind, like that's Larry Hoover Jr. Like he's been left behind. He's not allowed to be with his dad. He can't touch his dad. And you're right, that connects with Kanye's emotion to be with his mom and see his mom again, and how he can manifest his mom here on earth. Man, this album, it's got it all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's just so complex because like we talk about My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus and The Life of Pablo. Like they're very complex in this cinematic narrative musical kind of way, you know, like that has like all of the components. You could see everything tying together, but philosophically, like ideologically, just the societally, like everything this album's doing, like it's just so deep as a commentary on the human race and what it means to be human. It really is just like, I don't know, it's just something different from Kanye that, God, maybe we weren't ready for it. This season has just been like so draining in the best way possible, but like it's just forced us to think about humanity and so much. I mean, it's crazy.
I definitely, it makes the other albums, like we talk about how like in Ye's discography, like, you know, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus, and The Life of Pablo are the epics, right? Like as long as College Dropout and Late Registration are in terms of runtime, they're a little more simplistic in terms of what's happening on the album, because Ye was just at a simpler time in his life in a lot of ways. In the College Dropout, he's looking at where he's coming from, but it's also just like, can I make it in this industry? And Late Registration is like, okay, I have now become part of this industry, and how am I starting to deal with some of the highs and lows of fame, and how is that going to affect me moving forward? Which are both like really thought-provoking. They have some great songs, but that doesn't quite compare to like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, where he's like, I am dealing with the idea of my life feeling unreal at this point after a decade of fame and the loss of my mother, and I am depressed and don't know how to come to terms with everything and like and flail. Like there's just like a complete difference in depth and seriousness between like those two topics. But I feel like Donda is just standing on the shoulders of those other albums. It is like, it's so much more going on, like way deeper, way larger. It encompasses all of those albums, right? So it at once contains them while also expanding upon them. It's just what an achievement.
Yeah, I completely agreed. And yeah, I don't know. Like obviously you can find all of that nuance and depth in something like Yeezus or The Life of Pablo, but I think just like the tone and energy of this album, like it really just does feel different. It feels like it just feels so much more mature. Maybe that's a dumb way to put it, but it does. In a way, like I feel like I'm connected as I get older and I see somebody, like the way they're looking at the world and the way they're dealing with grief and adversity. I don't know. It's just so inspiring in a way those other albums aren't. I mean, those other albums are very inspiring.
But this is just different. This is built different.
Yes. So
built different, built Ford tough.
Exactly.
And then the next song we go into is New Again, which like in the aftermath of this, especially like if you focus in on Ye's portion specifically, and this like dark night of the soul that he has, and like recapping like all of this stuff that he's been through, and like wondering how he's going to move forward and everything that he's dealing with, like, but back to reality where everything's a tragedy. Like, being made new again is essentially like getting a fresh start on everything. Like, and that's been the tipping point of like Ye, Kids See Ghost, and Jesus is King, right? Ye, it's Ghost Town, where you talked about in the last episode, where he literally has Shake talking about like, oh no, it's not Shake talking about like No, is it? Oh my God. Why am I blanking on the specifics of Ghost Town? You have, once again, I'm a child, right?
Right.
I let go everything that I know and nothing hurts anymore. I'm kind of free. We're still the kids that we used to be. So it's this return to being a kid again. And then Kids See Ghost, it's reborn. You were reborn. You're free. And then on Jesus is King, it's water, which is emblematic of a baptism and the idea of everything we need. Like, God will provide everything we need. It's going to be okay. And you have a similar moment happening on this album where it's like, Keep My Spirit Alive, Jesus Lord, New Again are all kind of these songs that are just like, God will provide everything we need. You're reborn. You're a kid again. This is a baptism. And you come out of that like refreshed and feeling like confident and heading off in a new way.
Yeah. Man. People, I have to say, like, you don't understand how tough our job is. Like, as fun as it is to sit here and talk about Kanye, this guy makes it tough. There's so much contextuality. There's so much nuance. Kanye, like, you think you could just make like a nice, easy breezy album one of these days and like give us a break? Like, God.
Yeah, I mean, even Jesus is King, which we're like, oh, this is like short, had just a billion biblical references that were like meaningful to every song.
Yeah.
To where we're just like, yeah. Well, tell the visions ahead, you know?
Oh man, I'm looking forward to that episode. Hopefully that'll be a clean, like 45-minute episode.
I'm hoping for a nice like 15.
A tight 15 minutes.
We'll see. We'll see. But I guess that concludes this one.
Yeah, we did it. I'll say that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for those of you that have stayed with us on this journey.
Yeah, and we especially want to thank people who kept it wavy, and we would like to continue to keep it wavy.
Yeah. And I know that if you can keep it wavy, then you can also remain forever and always loopy.